All right, let's just dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're going to decode the mechanics of respiration. And to do that, we're actually going to start by solving a high-stakes exam question to see how these concepts play out in reality. We're going to look at the incredibly fascinating ways different living creatures breathe, and ultimately just how fragile our own biological systems can truly be.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The Selangor biology exam. 2. Cockroaches and cooking oil. 3. Comparing respiratory structures. 4. Animal breathing mechanisms. 5. Human gaseous exchange. And 6. Respiratory health and COPD. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Selangor biology exam.
Take a look at this. Straight out of the 2022 Selangor Tryon paper, we have the human respiratory system. It highlights the trachea branching down into the lungs. Now sure, it's your classic anatomical view, but it perfectly sets the stage for a very specific engineering problem that our bodies have to solve every single time we take a breath. So the exam asks us two main things here. First, identify the primary respiratory structure at the very end of this pathway, and second, explain exactly why the trachea is modified with these thickened rings of cartilage. It's not just structural decoration, it serves a literal life-or-death physical purpose.
The crucial takeaway is that the microscopic structure where the actual magic happens is the alveolus. That's the site of gas exchange. But to actually get the air down there, that cartilage is absolutely essential. It stops the trachea from collapsing when air pressure drops during inhalation. Think of sucking on a really flimsy plastic straw. If you pull too hard, the straw just flattens and blocks the liquid, right? Well, your trachea would do the exact same thing under the vacuum of your lungs expanding, if not for those rigid cartilaginous rings keeping the airway wide open.
Section 2. Cockroaches in cooking oil. Now let's shift gears and look at the cockroach's tracheal system. Notice anything missing? Unlike us, they don't have a central pair of lungs at all. Instead, they rely on these tiny pores spaced all along their abdomen called spiracles to directly take in air. These spiracles lead into a network of tubes called trachea, which then branch into even finer microscopic tubes called tracheoles that go right up to the insect's individual body cells.
So the exam throws a wild scenario at us. A cockroach falls into cooking oil and dies. Why exactly does that happen? Well, if a roach gets coated in oil, a very precise, fatal biological cascade happens. First, the spiracles on its abdomen are physically blocked by that viscous liquid. And because insects don't have a closed blood system carrying oxygen around like we do, blocking those pores instantly cuts off the oxygen flow to the tracheoles. The cells are immediately starved of oxygen, cellular respiration stops dead in its tracks, and it leads rapidly to death. It really is a stark reminder of how directly connected their internal cells are to the outside world.
Section 3. Comparing respiratory structures. To directly answer another part of our exam paper, we need to contrast the human and insect systems. Honestly, they have a lot in common. Both systems are highly adapted to have a massive total surface area. They have moist surfaces for gases to easily dissolve, and they have ultra-thin walls to speed up diffusion. But the real game changer? The difference. Humans rely on a dense, complex network of blood capillaries to taxi that oxygen around the body. Insects bypass blood altogether. Their tracheoles deliver oxygen straight to the doorsteps of their cells. To survive, every single large organism needs a huge total surface area to volume ratio for their respiratory surfaces. It's all about maximizing that real estate, and nature has engineered some pretty wild solutions to achieve this. Fish rely on these delicate filaments and lamellae in their gills. Frogs literally absorb gases through their moist skin as well as folded lungs. Humans rely on millions of tiny balloon-like alveoli. And, as we just saw, insects use an extensive network of tracheoles. The architecture completely changes depending on the animal, but the goal, maximizing the area for gas diffusion, is exactly the same across the board.
Section 4. Animal breathing mechanisms.
In humans, taking a breath is a beautifully coordinated mechanical process. It's driven by the contraction of your diaphragm, which pulls it flat, perfectly combined with your external intercostal muscles pulling your ribcage up and out. This expands the overall volume of your thoracic cavity. Thanks to basic physics, increasing that volume drops the pressure inside. The higher atmospheric pressure outside then simply forces air down your trachea, which remember is held open by that cartilage, and right into your lungs.
But a fish? A fish breathes in a totally different medium, water. To inhale, a fish lowers the floor of its buccal cavity, basically its mouth, while keeping its gill covers, the operculum, tightly closed. This creates a low-pressure vacuum that pulls oxygen-rich water inside.
Then, when it closes its mouth and raises the floor, the pressure suddenly spikes, forcing that water out over the gills where the oxygen is extracted. It is essentially a biological one-way water pump. Pretty clever, right?
Section 5. Human gaseous exchange.
Now, gaseous exchange inside us relies entirely on what biologists call the partial pressure gradient. It is a completely elegant, passive system. What this means is that oxygen naturally diffuses from the high-pressure environment inside the freshly filled alveolus across a barrier that is just one cell thick and into the lower-pressure blood capillaries. Carbon dioxide travels the exact opposite path, moving from the high-pressure blood into the low-pressure alveolus so it can be exhaled. No energy is required here at all. Physics does all the heavy lifting. Once your cells actually use that oxygen for cellular respiration, they generate carbon dioxide as a waste product. But how does that CO2 get all the way back to the lungs? Well, the vast majority of it, about 70%, is transported in the blood plasma as bicarbonate ions. Around 23% binds directly to hemoglobin, forming carbaminohemoglobin, yeah, that's a mouthful, and the final 7% is simply dissolved as carbonic acid in the blood plasma. It's a highly efficient waste removal system that crucially keeps our blood pH perfectly balanced.
Section 6. Respiratory health and COPD.
Returning to our exam paper for the final time, let's look at the harsh physical reality of emphysema. This is a type of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. In a normal, healthy lung, your alveoli are clustered together like really tight bunches of grapes, offering maximum surface area. But in an emphysema patient, the alveoli look drastically different. The delicate inner walls have literally deteriorated, turning what used to be many small balloons into one large floppy balloon. Because these alveolar walls are physically damaged and lose their natural elasticity, the total surface area available for diffusion drastically shrinks. And this is devastating. Even if the patient is mechanically inhaling just fine, their blood simply cannot absorb enough oxygen, nor can it efficiently offload that toxic carbon dioxide. It directly suffocates the patient from the inside out. It turns the simple, passive, effortless act of gaseous exchange into a constant, exhausting struggle.
Understanding this textbook biology highlights exactly why this stuff matters. It's not just about memorizing facts to pass an exam, it's about the fundamental mechanics of keeping your cells alive, second by second. So I'll leave you with this to consider. If your extremely delicate alveoli are the only barrier preventing your own cellular suffocation, what daily choices are you making to protect your respiratory health today?